welcome back. And I apologize for not posting any videos for the last couple of weeks. I've been working in Oregon, and there's a possibility at the end of this week I may be heading back out that direction for another couple of months, and probably won't get a chance to put anything up if I do. However, while I was out in Oregon, I took the opportunity to go visit the Spruce Goose. And for those of you who don't know what the Spruce Goose is, you probably have been living in a cave. During World War II, when the Germans were sinking virtually everything that we put on the water, the U.S. government was trying to figure out some way to get men, supplies, tanks, and so on and so forth into Europe. And Howard Hughes, the billionaire, took on a project to build an aircraft large enough to carry huge payloads. Now, this airplane ended up being 250,000 pounds, 250,000 pounds, with a loaded or laden weight of 400,000 pounds. The amazing thing was, this whole aircraft was built out of plywood. It was called the Spruce Goose because it rolled off the tongue fairly easily. But in actuality, it was mostly birch. Something like 97% of the aircraft is birch plywood. It carried 8 Pratt & Whitney R4360 4-row radial engines of 3,000 horsepower each. That means 24,000 horsepower. The propellers were 17 feet 2 inches in diameter. And to this day, no airplane has ever exceeded the wingspan of the H-4 Hercules, which is what its official name was. The wingspan was 320 feet 11 inches. That's larger than an Airbus 380. That's larger than a 747-8. That's even larger than the AN-225. That's the Antonov, the Russian heavy lifter. Nothing to date has ever exceeded the wingspan of this aircraft, which is incredible when you keep going back to the fact that this whole thing is made out of birch plywood. Now, unfortunately, it only ever flew once, and it was Howard Hughes' way of rubbing the government's nose in it, because they told everybody that Howard Hughes had ripped them off for the money to build this aircraft. The unit price was going to be about $2.5 million each. And Howard Hughes, and they were claiming Howard, they would never fly, and that Howard Hughes was nothing but a charlatan. So he flew the thing one time out over the ocean. It only lasted about 1.5 miles, but it was just to prove that it would get airborne. And the word, or the story, it goes that he paid back the government for all the money they invested in it, just so he could rub it in their nose and they would have no control over this aircraft. It is just the most amazing thing I've ever seen, and I'm going to show some video here in a second. But you're going to find it's rather disjointed, because I was in such awe over this aircraft, standing next to it, climbing through it. I took the extended tour and went through the cockpit and, pawed around, climbed around inside this airplane. It was incredible. They had a B-17 World War II bomber. That's a 4-engine bomber. And if you look up the B-17, it's not a small airplane in its own right. The B-17's wingspan, 4-engine bomber, is less than the span of the tail of the Spruce Goose. The tailplane is actually wider on the Hercules H-4 than the wingspan of the B-17 bomber, and that's the main heavy bomber that bombed Germany during World War II. The B-17 and the B-24 did most of the bombing. The B-29 was used mostly in the Pacific, and so to give you an idea, if you've ever seen a B-17, the tailplane on this wooden airplane is wider than the wingspan of the B-17. Incredible. You can walk inside the wings. The wing root, or the wing cord rather, is something like 11 feet high in the middle of the aircraft, tapering down to about 5 feet at the most out, the furthest outboard engine. There's 4 engines on each side. There's a ladder that goes up the inside of the vertical tail fin that's like 35 or 40 feet tall. So after you've walked all the way the length of the fuselage and gone through a hatch, there's a ladder, an inspection ladder, that goes up the vertical tail inside the aircraft. Just unbelievable. This thing has to be seen. The more I walked around it, the more I realized I was never going to get video that gave the scale of this thing any true meaning. And here's an interesting fact. If you started at the outer wingtip, the first flight that the Wright brothers took, if they'd started at the outer wingtip, would have only made it to the 3rd engine on that first section of wing. In other words, from the wingtip flying towards the fuselage, it would have gone 3 engines in and landed. It wouldn't have made it to the 4th engine. That one fact alone is staggering. That the first controlled flight by the Wright brothers was less than probably 5/8 the length of the wing, single piece of the wing. So anyway, here's the video. I hope you find it enjoyable, and again, I apologize for it being a little disjointed. I was just in such awe of this thing I couldn't even think coherently. So here it is. Enjoy. Here we are at the Evergreen Aircraft Museum in Oregon, and this building directly in front of you is the one that houses the Spruce Goose, the Howard Hughes H1. You can probably just about make it out through the glass. We're going to go in and look it over and take a tour. Off here to the left, we have a water park for the kiddies. And from what I'm told, the 747, sitting on top of the building is the start of the water slide. You go up into the aircraft and the slide actually starts from there, and well, you can see the white tube that spirals down. It's like a water park for the kiddies, something entertaining for them to do. Off here to the right hand side of the building with the Spruce Goose is the Air and Space Museum. There's supposed to be a lot of spacecraft related stuff inside, and it looks like they have a lot more aircraft parked out front. I recognize the PBY, that light blue aircraft. And we'll see what they have in that building before we're done. And over here we have a 747 sitting out in the field. I'll have to take a walk out and take a look at that later and see how that looks. So, let's get inside. Let's see what they have to offer.
Trying to get through this bunch of this other stuff.
Here we have the world famous Hughes H1, aka the Spruce Goose. Tough to put this into perspective until you realize sitting under its tail is a B-17 World War II bomber. That guy right there. That was considered a big airplane in its day. And the DC-3. Unbelievable. Remember that the B-17 and the B-24 dropped most of the tonnage and bombs during World War II. Again, that was considered, big airplane in its day. That's the Flying Fortress. And then you take a look at the tail of this aircraft and consider that's made out of plywood. Just incredible. And towering over the DC-3, which was also built in C-47 variants for the military for troop transport and supplies. And then the fuselage of the H-1. Unbelievable. Under the wing over there, I believe that's a Grumman Goose. I'll have to go down and take a look. This aircraft today still holds the record for the longest wingspan of any aircraft ever built. And to imagine, the whole thing is made out of plywood. True tribute to a genius of an engineer, or engineering team, I should say. No one engineer designed this, but under the direction of Howard Hughes, and no cooperation from the U.S. military. They wouldn't give him any aluminum, and that's why he chose wood. Aluminum was a war supply, and they were having political battles with Hughes at the time. Just unbelievable. And again, I have to point out the DC-3 over there in the background. Plane that's farthest out directly in front of you. And over there, the wingtip of the B-17, you can probably just make out the red on that wingtip. That's a B-17 bomber, 4-engine, 4,000-pound bomb load. In comparison to this aircraft, unbelievable. The sight of this fuselage lifting up off the ocean on the day that Hughes flew this had to have been awe-inspiring in its day. Way up here on the top is the flight deck, where Howard Hughes himself would have sat. Sorry about the camera shake, it's a little hard to do this handheld. And all the engineering compartments. Incredible. Again, in comparison, there's what I believe is a Grumman Goose. I still have to verify that. Just parked right under the wing root of this incredible aircraft. I wish I could convey my sense of awe in standing underneath this wing. This has been one of my bucket list items for such a long time. Go right up and over. It's just impossible to convey the scale of this. Come on, focus, focus. There you go. Here at floor level, there's the B-17, and you've probably seen those at air shows and have an idea of the scale of a B-17. There's the beginning of the tail of the H-1. And it keeps going and going and going. And this is one of those things that's frustrating because with the camera I just can't give you the scale. We'll get inside this here shortly and take a look around. And directly aft of the H1. Just incredible. And again, over here, the DC-3, which was built as a passenger airliner and carried about 24 people, and designed for rough fields, hence it's fairly tall. It's got a fairly fat fuselage. And we sweep back around, trying to do this without making you seasick. And hidden behind the P-51, again, is the B-17. Now the B-17 looks a little bit smaller than the DC-3 simply because it was meant to carry bombs and not people. It carried a crew of 10 and about a 4,000 pound bomb load. Of course, it wasn't a real effective airplane in Germany until this aircraft directly in front of you, the P-51, came in, and it was a long-range escort fighter. And then finally the B-17s could make their way all the way to the targets and deep inside Germany and Europe. But then we come away from those, and look at, there's just the tip of the horizontal stabilizer on the H1. I wish we could park the B-17 on top of that, just to give you an idea of the difference in scale. If you have any doubt that this in itself is not a big airplane, I mean, there's a Jeep with a trailer. And that Jeep's not a huge vehicle, but it gives you an idea of the scale of the B-17. So, okay, there you have it. About, oh, let's see, we get the wingtip to the engine on first engine on the right-hand side, and then we'll come up to the Hughes H1. Famous Corsair, made famous by the TV series Black Sheep. Originally designed for the Marines for aircraft carrier use, and actually became an island hopper during World War II. The bent wing was to give it a lower profile, or give the propeller some room, rather, and give the pull the wing tips in a little bit, made it a little easier to use on the carrier. Besides that, propeller on the front is huge. Finally, a look at the nose. Incredible. This must have seemed like science fiction back in the 1940s. That I didn't know. The wingspan is longer than a football field, and the tail span is actually longer than the wingspan of the B-17 we've been looking at over there behind it. And the vertical tail rises 80 feet in the air, an 8-story building. Unbelievable, the scale of this thing. and they have some information on the engines over here. Had 8 Pratt & Whitney R4360s, 3,000 horsepower each, and 8 propellers 17 feet in diameter. Payload of 130,000 pounds.
So this wingspan is longer than a football field. Place here, come here. Hey.
Rum and Goose.
On September 22nd, and was lowered into a 7-foot pit a week later. Re-assembly of the wings occurred on November 15th, followed by the vertical tail on November 20th. The pylons were assembled on January 25th, 2001, and crews attached the 8 Pratt & Whitney R4360 engines to the flying boat on February 23rd. Volunteers applied new fabric to the ailerons and began restoration of the flaps and horizontal stabilizers during the spring. They painted and repaired the colors attaching them to the aircraft in every day. This was followed by assembly of the horizontal stabilizers on May 25th, just in time for the new facilities opening June 6, 2001. After a busy summer, crews began assembling the flying boat's control surfaces. The flaps were assembled September 6th, the ailerons on October 9th, and the runner and outboards were attached early December. On December 7th, the 60th anniversary of the attack on Philadelphia, crews assembled the flying boats, the tail. After a ribbon cutting ceremony signifying the engagement, the flying boats were recovered. Now come the calls for Spruce.
And we'll take a little pan here from the DC-3 over to the B-17, all underneath the tail of the Hughes H-1 Spruce Goose. The longer I'm here, the more I just find it hard to imagine this lumbering into the air, made out of plywood, back in the early 1940s. Absolutely incredible. If we pan down here to one of the floats, the float dwarfs a little 2-passenger sport aircraft. The floats, by the way, were full of beach balls to allow for flotation in case the seam opened up. High tech of the day. Beach balls and you float.
90% of the plane is wood. A lot of these systems in here look like they've been made out of metal.
The hatchway down here is 4 feet tall, and there's 36 more feet of airplane behind that hatchway.
Even the risers are made of wood. Now there is some metal, like right there. You did have to
Under your feet are 14 1,000-gallon gas tanks.
That's still.
Gas tanks down here are 300-gallon tanks, and
Now they call it the Spruce Goose.
see that red label on it? That's your gas filter. Going up to the
His contract said he couldn't use any mild materials.
the power sort of a
Area limit, but also
square box.
when planes in World War II were built up.
Center of the spiral
That made it a
staircase
lighter
brings
one.
air 12 inch diameter, brings air from the flight deck down to the filter. 6 inch diameter pipe takes it back upstairs into a little tube that
I think it was said it was the lights of gas. You ever seen a black piece of plywood? You can really see it. I think it's just, it's like, well,
I haven't had diagram.
Hold on,
1842.
did down at the end, and then also, and then when they set it in blue, they hasn't really get the spring. Now the whole together, he did
The
have.
floor says no step. Didn't have electrical generator other than what's on the engine, from the wet cell, lead acid batteries.
9% wood.
Electrician said that,
They had a lot of
And tour guides, and I'd been wondering whether or not you could walk inside the wings like you could on the big Boeing flying boats. And sure enough, he said the chord of the wing is at the first engine almost 11 feet. So in other words, it's 11 feet thick there. And by the time you get out here to the fourth engine on the wing, it's still nearly 5 feet in chord. And it's unbelievable when you're standing here looking at it. The scale is just, you can't even fathom it. Wright Flyer, the first flight, had taken off at the wingtip. Their flight took them 1, 2, 3 engines and landed. That was the first flight in the Wright Flyer, that distance. Incredible.
Preparation began for the final temporary storage of the food. Moving crews, news crews, and spectators began arriving during the early morning hours of September 16, 2000. At 10 a.m., the B-17 Flying Fortress signaled the beginning of the procession across Highway 18. The vertical tail.
Yes, the submarines were taking out all the shipping, Allied shipping, and they needed a way to get supplies.
Yeah, it was Henry Kaiser that came up with the idea. He was the big shipbuilder of the day. The big heavy carrying plane they had of that era was a DC-3, which they called the C-47 in the military.
Right.
At best, you could carry 38 people in there. You can get more than 38 people just in the cockpit of this plane. The Wright Flyer, the first powered controlled flight plane, its first flight was 120 feet. So that's like if they took off at the wingtip, they would have landed on the third engine. And the last thing I'll point out to people, and this really pisses off people that work for Boeing, this was built in 47. It took Boeing another 30 years.
Good information.
Very good submarines, and they were torpedoing and sinking many of those ships. And when you're an island nation, you need all that stuff. Like, oh, that's a big problem. They sink even just one.
Yeah, got it. 2 weeks ago, he worked for Boeing. He just really couldn't mention that. But I did point out to him, well, your plane flew the first time you tried it, so. This plane only flew the once.
Now look right above here. You're gonna go and see these big beams that go.
Now you work here.
These big beams.
Yeah. Volunteer.
How often have you been inside?
I've only gone back all the way once because even us guys, we have to have an escort take us back there.
Really?
Yeah, the walkway back there
Yep.
only hold one person at a time. And they don't want you going back there and messing with things, so another docent has to go with you.
Right. If you look over here to your right, you guys can see the ribs in the airplane. Check yourself.
You down here? There are 14 1,000-gallon tanks below us.
Good. Just drag me, man.
If there isn't a tank there, he's got styrofoam in between the tanks.
Flotation?
Yeah, he was, no, since the seaplane, his big worry was it's going to sink.
Over there, we've sanded some of the fire-resistant paint off the outside.
14,000-gallon tanks.
And then there are 2 1,000-gallon tanks in the wings.
Wow.
16 1,000-gallon tanks total. Of course, you can only put like 900 gallons in them because of expansion. And you can count the tanks by, those are the tank beds.
Oh.
So they go all the way down the,
Okay.
yeah. And of course the kids always want to know about the beach balls. When they were reconstructing the plane when it got here, the floats at the end of the wings, when they went to put them on, they opened up to make sure there wasn't anything rotting in there. They found full beach balls. The night before the flight, Howard Hughes went out and had all his people buying all the beach balls he could find in Long Beach. Stuffed them in the tanks. The fire suppression system here, that was added after the original flight. During the original flight, he just had a person behind every engine with a fire extinguisher. The wings are so massive, a 6-foot-tall guy can walk out to the third engine before he needs to bend over. But after the original flight, he kept the plane in a hangar for 33 years in flight ready condition. If anytime he wanted to come down there, that plane better be ready to go in the air within minutes. Costs $1 million a year to do that.
Didn't bother him.
Never happened. I think there's a couple reasons for that. One is I think he was hoping that somebody would build a bigger prop engine, because jet engines and seawater don't work. It has to be a prop. And the other one was if somebody would come up for a need for a plane like this. Now, like I said, it took Boeing another 30 years because until then there was no need.
Plus, you got to rub it in the government's nose. I still have it, and it flies.
Yeah, I actually heard, since the contract, the government gave him $18 million, and then he put 7 of his own money in there. Somebody once told me that he actually paid the government back so they could not have any say over what's going on with this plane.
I read that somewhere also, yeah.
But there's styrofoam everywhere. Those gray things that look like tanks there, they're actually just styrofoam blocks. And then if you walk back there, you'll find them in between almost every rib. And then also, I've opened up a couple of these hatches along the floor, in between the tanks, styrofoam.
And I've heard there's another 30 feet aircraft
Past
flying.
that hatch, another 30 feet. Last week was the first time I went back there. There's a ladder back there that goes all the way up inside the tail. I got all the way to the top of that. Actually, you can touch the outside of the plane, and I wasn't even cramped. There was just so much space in there. These wings here, the center spar, it's 13 feet from the base to the top inside the wing. And when we get up there, you can see just how much room there was in there. If you have any questions about something, be sure to ask. I had a couple come in the other week and ask me, what's that thing? Well, it looks like it's for those. Well,
It's carrying the bottles, yeah, carrying the fire bottles.
Normally I tell them if I don't know the answer, I'll make something up because you won't know.
If you can't dazzle them with fact, baffle them with BS.
Boy, did I meet a lot of people that got away with that.
And somebody told me this was a HEPA filter.
Yes, this is a air purification system. You can see how massive it is compared to today's. It wasn't enough that he had going into the plane. He had a separate one for his own personal use. That tube goes all the way up to the
Flight deck. Wow. APU?
No, that's upstairs. These are actually backups to the hydraulic system. Both of them. You can actually see the hydraulic tanks up here.
Oh.
Good reason why you should step there.
All right.
But right here is your master kill switch. If everything was catching fire and going to hell, you yank that switch, everything shuts off. And you can see how Harry's like to save money. These were his office chairs. When they didn't need them in the office anymore, he brought them in the plane, took the wheels off, bolted them down to the deck.
Wow.
This is the first plane designed to use hydraulics because, as you can see, there was no way somebody pulling on a cable from the wheel was going to move the rudders or even the avions on this. So he was the first one to design a flight hydraulic system. Wasn't the first plane to use it. B-29 was in the air before, but they had to come to Howard Hughes to see how it worked. 1 pound of pressure on the control wheel up there is converted to 1,500 pounds at the flight systems.
I'm seeing electric motors up here.
Yeah, there's motors everywhere.
At first I was thinking
probably
flight control assist, but autopilot maybe?
I'm not sure what those are for. But since it was hydraulic, somebody asked me, well, what are those cables for? Well, that is the flight controls. They go back to the pumps, which are by the flight control surfaces. And then the other one I get a lot is, well, how are they going to get things in here? Originally, he had clam-shaped doors on the front, but as it got time to put this plane up in the air, he took the clam-shaped doors off because they could leak. He was afraid they were going to leak water. So, initial flight, he wanted to make sure this was going to fly. He took them off and put a flat nose on there. To this day, no one knows what happened to those doors. We've looked high and low. We got everything he ever put on paper, and we still have no idea what happened to him.
Direction finding antennas?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, it's a wooden airplane. I guess you can put them inside.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and jump up the stairs, hang on to something. Yeah, that's a good idea. That's why I don't want to have
I've whacked my head enough to know better.
Were you in the Navy?
No, but I've climbed in a lot of airplanes over the years, 17s, 24s.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what's worth doing tours on this and the B-17. Pretty much a toss-up. At least I don't hit my head like I do. on the B-17.
Gosh, first class cabin.
Yeah, first class seat. His employees got coach. 2 weeks ago, I had a guy come in here. His dad was sitting there the day the plane flew.
Really?
He had a picture of his dad sitting there and Howard Hughes bending over looking at the control system.
Unbelievable.
A couple of months ago, we had the son of the co-pilot. He came in. 3 years ago, the co-pilot actually came in.
Are you serious?
He's sold to travel now, so his son does it for him. Auxiliary power units. As you can see, there's two because you had to have a backup for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So how you start the Spruce Goose? That's how you start it.
Fire up the APU and
Yeah,
start
and
the
crank.
engines.
I put that on Facebook last week and everybody goes, oh, really? Wow. And I go, actually, it's really, almost all planes that era were either hand cranked or pull start.
Oh, there's
And
the
inside of the wings,
tunnel to the wing.
like I said, a 6 foot tall man can walk upright until out to the third engine
Good
before he actually
Lord.
has to start bending over. These down here are your fuel lines. These up here are your hydraulic lines. The hydraulic lines down here are just test cocks. Then that there is a pressurized fuel tank. That depressurizes the fuel tanks, keep air out of the fuel.
Mm-hmm.
As if air got into the engine and it would cause it to stall. Your main oil tank is that 13 gallons. Then you had a backup, 230 gallons.
Well, I was going to say 13 gallons seemed like a small tank for these engines. I was going to question you on that.
And
That makes
the way
sense.
this works is the same way a toilet works. It has the float
Mhm.
in the oil. It got down so far, it opened the valve, put more oil
Let
in.
more oil in.
And then he was still worried about not having enough oil. You can actually refill this tank from inside the plane.
Because I think each engine on the 17 had like 36 gallons.
On the B-17, they got 30 gallons on
Yeah,
each engine.
I know it was around 30 gallons, yeah.
Main circuit breaker, there are actually several of these throughout the plane, but this is the main one. Self-resetting circuits. Just like any circuit breaker, if it gets too hot, it'll pop, and once it got cooled down, though, it'd reset stuff. So you didn't have to have a guy back here replacing fuses all the time.
Crawl through to rear of wing.
Oh yeah, here.
Ah,
Take a look in there. It's like I said, it's 13 feet from the base there to the top.
holy cow. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Thank you.
Your voice radios. Unlike most radios of the time that were vacuum tube, these are actually crystal radios.
R77 Arc 3. Oh, okay.
Then the hatch here, that was so people could go out and work on the engine since there wasn't going to be a hangar for the plane.
Mm-hmm.
They needed to repair them, they had to be able to get to them. You can get to a good part of the engine just from inside the wing, but of course you can't get to all of it, so you had to be able to go out on the top of the wing to work on it. Also, Howard Hughes like just to go up there and look over his big plane.
I would. Go up there and take a chaise lounge and take in the
The
sun.
last group I had was a couple. There were the two kids, and they were asking a lot of really bright questions. But they go, "Well, why did he do all this?" And I go, "Well, he was the world's richest man." They go, "Really?" They go, "Why?" He was also the first billionaire. I mean, this guy was so rich. He was in a hotel in Vegas when he wanted a peanut butter sandwich, and they said the kitchen's closed. He bought the hotel and told them they better get his peanut butter sandwich. And you better have one ready for me anytime I want it.
Now, this is original?
No, this is not original.
Not the plexi, but I mean the size of the opening?
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
that's everything on that side would have been just on this side as well.
Okay.
But in the late 80s, Disney took over control of the plane,
Ah,
and the plane was getting really vandalized. So we're still missing a lot of things. All the personal flotation devices that were under the seats have disappeared, and a lot of the knobs off the stuff up here were disappearing as well. So Disney shut down the plane, wouldn't allow anybody to come on it, but they put the plexiglass window so you could walk on a walkway up here,
And look in.
take a look in.
That makes sense.
And then that's also another reason why this plane wasn't flown up here. When they did that, the plane lost its structure integrity. Hey, you just can't replace it. You got to replace everything.
As long as it had been since it flew, I don't think they would have flown
No,
it anyway.
it wouldn't have passed a flight certification
Yeah.
either. And then the main reason is it didn't really fly anyhow. Now, every pilot I ever brought up here says that is not flying, that's ground effect. And I said, yeah, I know that, you know that, but we really got to say it flew 1 mile, 70 feet. Backup engineer station. This is the prototype, so the finished product would not have had all this.
Sure.
There would have been a pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, and that's it.
Yeah, a lot of this
Now-
was probably flight instrumentation just to check everything out. Yeah.
Since this is a prototype, he had to make sure everything was working. First plane with hydraulics, he wasn't sure if they worked. He had 5 backup electrical hydraulic systems, and then in case they all failed, the last one right here, that is a hand pump system. A guy could have hooked up a hand pump and kept the hydraulics going with that. And as you can see, the DC-3 could only hold 38 people at best. Could have easily got more than that just on
Yeah,
this flight.
this cabin's bigger. This is more room in here than the DC-3.
Oh, easily. Actually, I had a 747 pilot come in the other day. He says, yeah, this is actually like the top deck of the 747. Yeah, once again, where do you think I got the idea? All wood. Yeah, even these risers here, these are wood also.
Wow.
Now, of course, the cockpit is all aluminum, but very little of that will be. 90% of the plane is wood, and now that 90% of wood, 90% of the wood is birch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The reason why they called it the Spruce Goose was wooden planes were made of spruce in that day.
Well, plus it sounds better. It kind of rhymes.
Well, yeah, it doesn't ring. Yeah. Birch Goose just doesn't ring. But the reason I think the reason why I wasn't using spruce is the same reason why I didn't use aluminum. It was a vital war material.
War material, yeah. All voltage indicators.
And once again, I love the. Oh, if there
Office
was employers,
chairs.
they didn't have to be comfortable. Yeah, we got these office chairs not being used. We'll put them in the flight deck.
Oh yeah, oscillograph.
Yeah, I had to look up what it was.
So yeah, if on the production planes, all of this stuff would be gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, only the stuff from here forward would be there. Of course, there wouldn't even have been the HVAC system either. But there's the tube that come up just for Howard.
Radio compass.
Yeah, main radio.
RA1J. 150 kilohertz to 20 megahertz.
Yeah, you ever tried tuning a radio, tune in?
Yeah, I used to.
Yeah, it's quite a, takes some skill to do those.
I'm a ham radio operator, so I've got all kinds of this boat anchor stuff laying around at
Yeah, my
home.
neighbor's the same way, and one of my closest friends, well, the reason why I got into aeronautics, one of my closest friends in college, when he got out of college, he was an electronic engineer and got hired by Boeing. So whenever I went to see him, I had to know something about aircraft so I could talk to the guy.
Look at this engine instrumentation.
Yeah. And somebody go, well, how can you remember all that? And I go, well, you didn't have to remember all that. This is the same gauge as this, this, and this. This is just engine 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, 1 through 8.
Yeah.
Plus, after you've worked on the thing for a year, assembling it and testing it, it's all committed to memory. It's like as
Oh, yeah.
familiar as your house to you at that point.
You know, I was a police officer for 22 years, and you know, you did all that training because when the situation happened, it was just all automatic.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't even really think about your dad; you just knew what to do.
It's amazing. That's okay to go up a little?
Yeah, go ahead and have a seat up there, and I'll get a picture.
Okay, let me put this down just for a second. Get the camera bag off of me.
Feel good?
Yes.
Feel like a billionaire?
You feel like a billionaire.
No, that's kind of dark. I'm gonna have to do that again.
Okay. That's tough against a light background.
Yeah. And I'm not used to Nikons. I got a Canon. Okay. Oh, yeah, it's all the world.
Better? Okay.
Yeah, when you go to the gift shop, they'll have a photo for
Where Howard Hughes actually sat.
you. Yep. November 7th, 1947. And yeah, I don't know what all these things do.
Well, hydraulic, artificial feel,
Yeah, last kids they asked me what were these. Well, it's there, but I have no
hydraulic changeover for something.
idea. Okay.
Hydraulic shutoff valves, master. No idea. Pump, hand pump hydraulic system. Gust control.
Yeah, of course, since this plane's so big, keeping it balanced is a big trick. And he has this trim tab. It's the joystick on your left there.
On my oh. Boy, that's awful modern looking.
Yeah. And that's just to keep the plane trim so it would be in balance when it's in the air. You know, they were saying it had a crew of 3. Well, any cargo plane usually has a cargo master also.
You've got elevator trim here.
Yeah. And the flap should be over there also.
Pitot heater pilot. Yeah, heat.
And then that sticker in front of you, they're asking me about that, and I said, well, you have to realize we're like 50 some odd feet above the ground.
Don't even.
So that's that would be so he could judge where the plane, the
Yeah.
hole was close to. So it's kind of like an artificial horizon for landing on the water.
He's actually got a pretty good
Incredible
view.
setup, yeah. That 747 pilot came in here and says this is actually just about the way my cockpit looks.
This is incredible.
What that guy had last week from Boeing, he was not happy every time I kept pointing out. And it took Boeing another 30 years.
I see synchronization.
No idea.
Well, if the props aren't synced, you get that rah, 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 rah.
Well, he had the guy back there marking the props too.
Flaps, prop RPM, increase, decrease. It must have tied them all together. Okay, to move the
Yeah,
throttles.
then you can go ahead and do that. Oh, they move. The kids up here were doing moving around. And engines 3, 4, 5, and 6 can go into reverse. The original design that his engineers came up with, it had only 4 throttles. But this is a flying boat, and it didn't have a rudder. Most
Yeah, you got
boats
to use
do.
the engine to turn.
Yeah, and so he said, I gotta have control over all 8 engines. And then the ones going in reverse. This is the first plane that had reverse props.
All right, so we've got probably 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8. So you've got manifold pressure for the 8. Well, yeah, 1 and 2, 3 and 4 RPM. Wow, incredible.
Yeah, incredible feat of engineering from a guy who didn't take any engineering classes or any aeronautic classes. This crap would just pop in his head, and I got an idea.
What a view.
Yeah. Okay, imagine this is out there on Long Beach the day it took off. I had a guy who was on the beach the day he saw this plane make its one flight.
Well, can you imagine there was some reporters, camera people on board.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how they felt when all of a sudden they were in the air when supposedly they were just out there to taxi?
Well, it's my understanding all the media was taken off the plane before he took it up in the air.
I thought they had 1 or 2 guys on board, no?
Probably.
I must have hit the button, stopped recording. And this stuff's not labeled.
No, probably was at one point. Well, then you notice we had to put in a fire sprinkler system. Say McMinnville said this is not a plane, it's a building. So you need to have a separate sprinkler system.
Well, you know, in an artifact this rare and valuable, it kind of makes sense.
Well, it's a one of a kind, and I don't know why anybody would want to build another.
Franklin engines for the APU unit.
Picture number 9 sending in.
I didn't catch your name.
Dan.
Dan, I'm Vern. Nice to meet you.
Is this your first time here?
It is. I'm from New Hampshire.
Oh, so yeah. When people come here, they ask me, is it worth going into the cockpit? And I say,
We're changing the windshield wipers on the shuttle for about 30 minutes. We'll be out of service.
I tell people, if this is the only time you'll ever be here, yes, you do need to go up there. If you're going to come back another day with kids or some other family members,
That
wait.
just about wraps up our brief tour of the Hughes H1 Spruce Goose, or the HFB Hughes Flying Boat 1, as I understand Mr. Hughes liked to call it. Incredible piece of work, unbelievable piece of technology for the day. Hope you enjoyed this short little visit. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe, and hopefully in the future I'll be able to do a few more of these and some of these rare items like this. For now, I'm the Radio Mechanic. See ya. That just about concludes our tour of the Evergreen Museum. We're out here in the parking lot. And over there's a kind of a memorial to all the Air Force and personnel who've served our country over the years. And there's even some stuff on display out here. We have some military vehicles up on the hill that the kids can go up and look at. Got a MiG-15 sitting outside. This is the main building that has the Spruce Goose and all of the piston propeller aircraft, and where I spent most of my time. They have a movie theater where they show various movies about flight, some about fighter pilots and some about the history of flight. They have a various number of movies that run during the day. And this is the Aerospace Museum, where you saw the helicopters, the SR-71, all the jet aircraft, all the jet fighters, and they also have a great deal of space hardware, rocket engines. You can get up close and personal and touch the hardware and look inside the jet or the rocket nozzles. Pretty amazing. And out here it looks like this is overflow. We have aircraft that won't sit or fit inside the building. They can't get them on the floor, and some more space paraphernalia out here. Unfortunately, the benefactor who put all of this together died, and the corporation that owned all of this has gone bankrupt. Now, somebody has purchased 2 of the buildings and has promised to keep the buildings up and running for a while, but unfortunately is taking the B-17 and the P-51 and a couple of other aircraft out to fly them out to the East Coast to a museum out there. So if you get out here and to Oregon, you should drop by, visit the museum, and your tickets will help support what's going on here, keeping these aircraft preserved. And by the way, that C-47 was one of the D-Day planes. That was an actual participant. And one of the museum guides was telling me it's a shame that the C-47, which was an actual World War II veteran, is sitting outside, while the DC-3 you saw inside was just I think he said Eastern Airlines. Of course, the DC-3 inside is in flying condition, but it's a shame to have either one of them sitting outside, actually. So that about wraps it up for our little tour of the Evergreen Museum here in Oregon. And not a professional video by any stretch of the imagination, but hope you got something out of it. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, I'm the Radio Mechanic. See you again.